IMF, World Bank and WFP has warned that the Middle East conflict is driving a global food crisis by disrupting supplies and surging oil, gas and fertilizer prices. This impacts the most vulnerable populations, particularly in low-income, import-dependent nations, with the potential to add 45 million people to extreme hunger. The organisation's statement reads, "The Middle East war is upending lives and livelihoods in the region and beyond." We're now joined by Dr. Jaijit Bhattacharya, who's an economist and policy expert, joining us now from New Delhi. Good morning, Dr. Bhattacharya. It's a pleasure to have you back on the bulletin. Now, what can we make of this latest statement? Will we really see this impact 45 million people around the world? Will these negotiations put an end to the worst impacts from this war? And what do you make of this latest statement?
Let's look at it from the larger context. Since this decade started, we have had one crisis after the other, starting with COVID, and then the Ukraine war, which already had an impact on the availability of food, because Ukraine was the food basket or the wheat basket of Europe. So there was already a constraint in terms of food supplies. As the world was trying to adjust to it, we had two more conflicts, the Gaza conflict and now the Iran conflict. And clearly the upstream of agriculture is petrochemicals. A lot of the fertilizer that is badly needed for agriculture comes from petrochemicals. In fact, nitrogen, which is key for most of the agriculture that we do in this planet, is based on petrochemicals. With not just the constraint of petrochemicals because of the war, there is also has been a impact on the infrastructure which has been manufacturing the required petrochemicals, and therefore downstream such as urea and other fertilizers will clearly get impacted. Along with it, what is also happening is because those who get impacted at the end of the day are also the ones who are going to produce food. So if that set of labor gets impacted because of non-availability of food and because of non-availability of fertilizer, will also have a more permanent impact moving forward. And that's also a larger concern of how these loops and feedbacks will play into each other. There is also another dimension of agrochemicals. For example, PEDA is absolutely critical for rice farming. And many of these agrochemicals also have the upstream as petrochemicals. And therefore, there is going to be significant impact in both in terms of agrochemicals and in terms of fertilizer, which is going to lead to the food crisis. Also, we need to keep in mind that this is the sowing season in at least the tropical parts of the world. And if you are missing the sowing season or the farmers are cutting down on fertilizer because of either unavailability or unaffordability, then that's going to have a very significant impact on the next harvest that we have.
Indeed. Dr. Bhattacharya, do you think that we'll see a return to the development levels that we were seeing before this war? Of course, you've mentioned before that we've seen catastrophic event after catastrophic event these last couple of years. But if we do see a resolution and the oil prices return to what was relatively normal before this war, do you think global development could get back on track, or will those 45 million people who are downstream of this conflict still be feeling the worst impacts?
Well, it depends on the perception, because the development will happen only if people believe that they can make an investment in a safe and secure world. If the perception is that there is no lasting security, then why will people invest billions of dollars which can then be bombed a few weeks later? The actions that have happened in the last 1 month defy any rationale in that sense, any overt rationale in that sense. And therefore, without a very clear rationale, why did the war happen? Why did thousands of Iranians die and hundreds of Americans die? Why was infrastructure broken down? Why were bridges bombed? Why were industrial infrastructure targeted? So if we need to repair, and of course there will be some investments going into the most important of these infrastructures so that there is drinking water and oil and energy available. But will there be a large-scale investment immediately is something that's that's doubtful. We have seen that even in the case of US and Venezuela, that even though the US is controlling Venezuela and giving some kind of a peace guarantee, we don't see the American investors rushing into Venezuela to put in the infrastructure and the investments needed for those infrastructure. So coming back to your question, will we see a boom in investments immediately after this conflict is over? It depends on whether there is a perception that this is going to be a lasting security or not.
Mm-hmm. And you just touched on Venezuela. Now, from an economic perspective, if this market in Venezuela is opened up to foreign investors and they do take that opportunity, you mentioned, of course, they've been quite reluctant so far, but if we do see a flood of Venezuelan oil into the market over the next couple of months, would this be having a positive effect on the cost of living around the world, or will it still not be enough to reverse the damage to the market that the last month has made?
So theoretically, yes, if there is a significant amount of oil flowing from Venezuela, and Venezuela has one of the largest deposits of oil in the world, so theoretically, yes, if there is a flow of oil coming from Venezuela, it will address some of these issues. However, the infrastructure that is there globally largely does not cater to the kind of oil that Venezuela produces, which is thick and viscous. And also it has got certain properties which make it difficult to handle. And hence that infrastructure itself will take a significant amount of time to be put into place, and Venezuela itself does not have the infrastructure. So it's going to be a long time before oil starts flowing from Venezuela in the volumes that are needed. And hence we'll still be facing the kind of challenges that we're talking about. I think the one silver lining that I see in this challenge is that because there is a constraint on some of these fertilizers, so countries like India, which were using fertilizers quite indiscriminately, especially fertilizers like urea, and were actually harming the soil, perhaps they will rein back some of the mindless use of some of these fertilizers. So that's a good point because it will help the soil to recover. But largely, there will be a challenge in terms of fertilizer availability and therefore the impact on food.
And we'll keep watching those developments. Dr. Bhattacharya, thank you very much for joining us today on the Bulletin. Pleasure to have you back.